President Trump stated yesterday that acetaminophen, the active ingredient in Tylenol, is causing autism and warned pregnant women to avoid the drug. He says the Food and Drug Administration will update drug labeling to include warnings for pregnant women about using the painkiller. The president also suggested that a cancer drug, which appears to help get a form of vitamin B into the brain, might help relieve some symptoms of autism. The announcements were made despite a lack of clear scientific evidence to support the decisions. There are only anecdotal reports that the cancer drug could help people with autism. What do you think? Do you believe the president's warning on Tylenol? Now is the time to give us a call at 713-440-8870.
And to help us dig a little deeper into this topic, joining us now is Dr. Peter Hotez, Dean of the National School of Tropical Medicine at Baylor College of Medicine, an advocate for global health equity. He's also the author of the book, Vaccine Did Not Cause Rachel's Autism, My Journey as a Vaccine Scientist, Pediatrician, and Autism Dad. Thank you for joining us today. I'm assuming this is a very busy day for you yesterday and today.
Yeah, I thought with the wind down of COVID over time that would be the end of my media and TV and radio career, but Mr. Kennedy seems determined to call me out of retirement when it comes up.
So let's just start with the
zingers all the time. So.
Let's start right there with the headline. Everyone is up in arms and concerned that Tylenol is causing autism in pregnant women. Your thoughts?
So if I could, let me break it down a little bit because a little bit of background will go a long way. So, we've identified more than 100 genes that are involved in autism, and they were first published in a paper in a very prestigious journal called Cell in 2020 led by a group at the Broad Institute at Harvard, MIT, who were collaborators with our Genome Center at Baylor College of Medicine. And almost all of them are genes involved in early fetal brain development, especially around the prefrontal cortex. The genes are activated in early fetal brain development, so there are mutations or other defects with those genes. They can translate into the appearance of autism, and now we call it autism spectrum disorder because it's not a single condition; it's at least 100 different conditions. So, I think that's another really important point. Now, that doesn't mean that there's no environmental effects, but what they're environmental effects interacting with autism genes. And that's why, over the years, I've been pushing back against vaccines because by the time, a child's born, the autism processes are well underway and vaccines are not going to have any effects. And at least yesterday, the White House didn't talk about vaccines necessarily causing autism, which I guess is a positive sign. But there are at least a half a dozen known chemical exposures early on in pregnancy that will influence autism genes to increase the likelihood your child will be born with autism. So to start off right off the bat, even without any of those environmental exposures, your child could still have autism. And that probably accounts for most of the autism.
I want to pause you just here for 1 second so you can clarify something you said. You said you've been pushing back on vaccines. You mean the idea that vaccines cause autism, correct?
That's right. Vaccines do not cause autism because autism is all occurring during early fetal brain development. Now, autism clearly has a very strong genetic basis operating through those 100 autism genes. But there are some environmental exposures that could be associated with interactions of autism genes to increase the likelihood of autism. And as I've talked to Mr. Kennedy over the years there's about half a dozen chemical exposures that have been identified like that. The best described one from my reading of the scientific literature is a medication called Depakote. Depakote is an anti-seizure drug. The other name for it is valproic acid or valproate. And so if you don't know that you're pregnant, and because if you are pregnant, the obstetrician will tell you to not get off your Depakote. If you're on it, it can interact with autism genes and greatly increase the likelihood of that your child will be born with either autism or something closely resembling autism. So that's clearly something that you want to avoid. And there's at least 5 or 6 other chemical exposures like that. Tylenol has not been on that list. And, there was a really strong, really impressive undertaking, a paper that was published in 2024, and it was led by a group at a place called the Karolinska Institute in Sweden, which is really one of the top biomedical research institutions, really anywhere in the world, but certainly the top biomedical research institution in Sweden, clearly showing no link between Tylenol and autism from that 2 million person study. So you would think, okay, maybe that closes the door on this. But then an article came out over the summer in what's called a systematic review. And what this group did, and one of the authors is at Harvard Chan School of Public Health, is they, tried to go through the literature and look at all of the different studies, maybe at least a dozen studies. I forget the number of studies they actually looked at. I think there's a couple of dozen studies, and studies of varying degrees of strength in terms of, numbers and things like that. And what they found is that some of the studies do show an association, but other studies don't. And that's not unusual for a systematic review. So what's the take-home message from that? And the take-home message from that is, well, maybe there's something there, and it's certainly worth looking into. And if you had to rank a list of chemical exposures that you worry about, based on what I've seen so far, I would not put Tylenol near the top compared to the other ones, which is a much stronger association. But it's certainly worth looking into. So had the White House held a press conference and say, look, we really do want to understand autism better, that we do think there's a rise in autism diagnosis. We think most of that is due to shifting diagnostic criteria, because now we've gone from calling it autism spectrum disorder. We're much more inclusive. We're getting better at diagnosing autism in girls and women. We used to say it was 10-to-1 boys to girls. Now it's 3-to-1. Maybe it's closer to parity, so the numbers will go up more. But we do think there could be some environmental exposures as well. These are the ones that are really strong. We're also going to look at Tylenol and really convene all of the experts in neuroscience and environmental health to convene and help us figure that out. Had they done that, that would have been a very reasonable thing to do. But what do they do instead? Instead, they don't talk about autism genes. They don't talk about any of the other known chemical exposures that do have an association, and do this laser targeting on acetaminophen, Tylenol, as though it's a fait accompli. And it makes no sense. It makes no sense scientifically, and it also rings hollow, because just the whole way Bobby Kennedy, the secretary, frames autism is in these very simplistic terms, or the way the president talks about it, they say they're going to find the cause of autism or the cure for autism. But think about it, if it's 100 different genes, right? We know there's 100 different types of autism. To use an analogy with some mixed success in that, looking at, cancer, nobody would ever say, now we're going to reveal the cause of cancer or the cure for cancer. Why? Because there's hundreds of different types of cancers and hundreds of different types of oncogenes, each with their own environmental triggers. So it's sort of baby talk, or this kind of childlike notion of thinking about a very complicated condition
to help,
like autism. So that's kind of the big 30,000-foot overview.
To help people put this in context too, when you look at something like this, if a pregnant woman is taking Tylenol, and so then they have an autistic child, you say, oh, look she took Tylenol, therefore that's what caused the autism. But she may be taking the Tylenol because there's some pain or something that's happening that Tylenol's appropriate for, but it's really whatever's causing that pain or issue may be related to the autism, if I'm explaining
or most likely
enough.
It's the autism genes, and,
right.
and it may be completely unrelated. Or what's kind of interesting, there is some literature on looking at congenital viruses that can cause, that may be linked to autism, and maybe the fever was a sign of a congenital virus. So all of that should be on the table of looking at, but to, again, kind of completely toss out all the cards and say now we're only focusing on Tylenol, not only does it not make sense scientifically, there's actually scientific evidence to refute it. And so I think it's really important if you're pregnant and you're having pain and you're concerned, the most important thing you do is you have that discussion with your OB, with your obstetrician.
Which that's exactly what I was going to ask. Dr. Hotez, as somebody who has been pregnant, oftentimes we are already on high alert about what we should take and what we can't take. I mean, I know friends who we won't touch sushi. And I say I'm not pregnant right now, but I've been there in that mind, in that space. How alert should pregnant women be, or somebody that potentially is trying to get pregnant? Is this we should pause taking it? Is it, I'm going to call my doctor? And, where should we be looking at this from a female perspective?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you've probably asked, as you always do, Celeste, you asked the most important question. And I'm going to punt a little bit, because for the simple reason that I'm not an obstetrician, and I don't want to overreach here. And so and I'm sure this is something the obstetricians are all thinking about right now. But this is the kind of discussion that you're going to have with your obstetrician, and the obstetrician's also going to have to think about the evidence and realize that you don't want to have fevers while you're pregnant. You don't want to be in pain. We don't have a lot of other options because obstetricians don't like using ibuprofen or aspirin in pregnancy because of other potential medical effects on the fetus. So it's not like there are a lot of choices out there. So that's kind of a long way of saying that's going to have to be a discussion with you and your obstetrician.
And there's even word that if you just muscle through it, as Trump suggested, that's bad for the fetus. To withstand the pain and not do something for it is bad for but again, I'm not an OB-GYN either.
Yeah, I mean, it's telling moms, who, are the most important human beings on our planet, that they're just going to have to muscle through it. First of all, they muscle through life.
I was just going to say, we've been told that often before. That wouldn't be the first time.
And just to tell them, suck it up, and
And
there are no words.
There is concern. You brought this up, Celeste, earlier too, about fever. If a woman is pregnant and has a high fever, that can cause, where Tylenol may be able to help reduce the fever, that you're putting the fetus at a different sort of.
Yeah, in fact, I was on last night on Anderson Cooper, and I was with Sanjay Gupta, who I love, and that's exactly what he said, and I think he's right. So,
Dr. Hotez, do you think that this will now put the medical, OB-GYNs and obstetricians in a vulnerable position? Because if they have, mothers or pregnant women who are calling them and saying, what do you think? And they say, no, go ahead, you should be okay, from knowing your medical history. Do you think that now puts them in a vulnerable position from a legal perspective?
Yeah, it may, and this is something that the Society of Obstetricians are going to have to weigh in, and there's a couple of them, and they're outstanding organizations. So one has the lovely acronym ACOG, which stands for, I have to get this right, American College of Obstetricians and Gynecology. So they issue guidelines. There's also another, and I'm sure there are others as well, but the other major important one is the Maternal Fetal Medicine Society. So they will likely, in response to this, either maybe they already have issue a statement or clinical guidelines or algorithms about how to manage that, and perhaps that will afford some kind of legal protection for OBs as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fascinating story. What would you recommend at this point in time for parents, for people to take away from what we've heard, from all the coverage of this, from what the White House has said, from what the health organizations are saying now? Where should they stand right now, and how do you see them moving forward?
I would say the way you think about that White House press conference is it taught us nothing new, and it was one of the more fact-free 15-minute White House press conferences that we've heard in a long time. And so there are not a lot of takeaways from it. They made a big splashy point of saying we're going to find the cause, earlier, I think it was even before the summer, that we're going to, quote, find the cause of autism, find the cure for autism, this kind of nonsense. I mean, again, it's baby talk. It was never something that they ever should have offered in the first place. I think that's the point. And sure enough, there's not a lot of there.
I'm going to steal that line, fact-free, from you. We have a call on the line. Chris from Montrose. Chris, what is your comment or question for Dr. Hotez?
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for taking my call. Doctor, I have a question for you. So I think the big concern that we all share is that with whomever it is that's in charge at the national government giving this information that's arguably questionable, that professionals like yourself call out as questionable, it starts to undermine the legitimacy of those messages. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are as an insider. If that's going to continue into the future, is that necessarily bad, good, right? At what point does the private medical profession take over that role and become the go-to resource? And I'm not saying that's good or bad, but like if we didn't look to the federal government for answers to what's the best medical advice, would that be bad or would that be fine? Because it seems to me like getting our answers for questions like Celeste is posing from persons like yourself is much more logical than getting it from the White House. And I'll hang up and listen to your answer.
Yeah, no, and Chris, we both live in Montrose, so maybe I'll see you in the neighborhood sometime. But feel free to stop and talk. But I think you said what your question in common is very profound, and here's why. Because I'm a professor at a medical school, right? I am not employed by the United States government, and the reason that's relevant is I don't have the same level of accountability in that sense, other than my own, pride in my profession and my professional responsibilities. But I'm not employed by the U.S. government, so it's a big difference, right? When something's coming from the Centers for Disease Control or the FDA, one of the government agencies, the NIH, and it's very disconcerting to have misinformation now coming out of Washington, D.C. And there haven't been a lot of precedents for it. I mean, sure. I mean, during the pandemic, you might have heard me sometimes saying, well, the CDC said this, but, it's not quite how I would frame it. That's very different from what we're talking about right now. And so there isn't a lot of precedents to go on there. One of the things that started to happen, which is also not good, but it seems to be, taking shape, is that several coalitions of states are banding together to create their own parallel set of recommendations, starting with vaccines. So this has happened now in the western states, so the state of Oregon, California, Washington State. I think maybe Hawaii has joined them now, have gotten together to create this coalition for alternative vaccination recommendations. I understand New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts may do the same. It's I guess it's being born out of necessity because the states feel now they're on their own and they can't rely on the federal government. This is not good for anybody. It's and we've never been in a situation like this. And it was never a big issue in the first Trump administration. I mean, Secretary Azar, the Health and Human Services Secretary, he was great. He actually invited me to speak at the World Health Organization at his event that he had to explain why vaccines don't cause autism. It's this new stuff that I think everyone is kind of struggling with trying to figure out.
Dr. Hotez, I want to grab one more call quickly, and then we will say goodbye. Allison from Jersey Village. What's on your mind, Allison?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
I would encourage all pregnant people, no matter your political background, to not take any medical advice from Donald Trump or JFK Jr., and to seek medical advice from medical professionals such as Dr. Hotez. Thank you.
Allison, thank you very much. We have Dr. Hotez, not Dr. Hotez, with us. But as we have always said throughout running all the shows here, you should always, no matter what advice you hear from even our doctors on air, talk to your own medical professional. They know you, they know the case.
The good news, Ernie, is, we're really blessed here in Houston. We've got this extraordinary Texas Medical Center and the hospital systems, and we have some of the finest obstetricians in the country, and I've gotten to know many of them, and so that there is some good news to this as well.
Yeah. Dr. Hotez, thank you very much. Pleasure to have you with us. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're kind of busy with this announcement, and a lot of folks are reaching for you, so thank you for always making yourself available to us right here in your own community. Yeah.
Thank you, Ernie. Thank you all. You're all the best.
Thank you. Dr. Peter Hotez is the Dean of the National School of Tropical Medicine at Baylor College of Medicine, and he is also the author of the book, Vaccines Did Not Cause Rachel's Autism, My Journey as a Vaccine Scientist, Pediatrician, and Autism Dad.